Elena came to the rooftop party to surprise her boyfriend. Instead, she found him kissing her best friend. Not hiding. Not guilty. Comfortable. Like it had been going on long enough that they had stopped being careful. David saw her. And instead of shame, he straightened his jacket and walked toward her slowly, with that unbothered, almost amused look that told her he had no intention of apologizing. Not tonight. Not ever. The entire rooftop was watching. Waiting. And Elena was frozen, every word she had rehearsed completely gone. Her eyes moved without thinking, searching for anything. An exit. A miracle. That is when she saw him. Standing 2 feet away. So quiet. A Korean man in a dark suit, holding a drink he had barely touched, watching the city skyline like none of this noise deserved his attention. Elena reached out and grabbed his hand. He looked at her. Not surprised. Just waiting. My new boyfriend, she said. David laughed. The crowd leaned in. Then the stranger turned slowly, placed one hand at her jaw, and kissed her in front of everyone. Not rushed. Not performative. Calm and certain, like a man who had simply been choosing his moment. The rooftop went completely silent. Then someone near the back whispered a name. Kong. Elena watched the color drain from David's face. Watched Amanda take a full step backward. Watched the crowd instinctively create distance around the man standing beside her. She had no idea who he was. But whatever that name meant to everyone else on that rooftop, it had turned her desperate little lie into something much bigger. And much more dangerous. Welcome to Stories from Seoul. If you are new here, this channel is your home for stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat from the first second to the last. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And wherever you are watching from tonight, drop your city in the comments. We love knowing where our family is tuned in from. Now let's get back to Elena. Because what happened after that kiss was only the beginning. She found him outside on the lower terrace, away from the noise, leaning against the railing with his back to the party. She had spent 20 minutes trying to look normal inside, accepting drinks she did not finish, smiling at people whose names she barely knew, watching the city lights below like they owed her something. She kept her spine straight. She kept her expression neutral. She had been doing it her whole life, performing calm in rooms that deserved her fury. But this time the effort had a deadline. She walked straight toward the Korean man who had kissed her without asking. He did not turn when she approached. He was still watching the city below, still holding the glass that was mostly full. Up close, she could see that his suit was not simply dark. It was the kind of fabric that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and it fit him the way expensive things fit people who have stopped caring about appearing expensive. There was a stillness to him that was not the absence of something but the presence of a lot of something, carefully contained. You had no right to do that, she said. He turned. His expression was the same as it had been all evening. Unhurried. Unreadable. Your lie would not have worked otherwise. I did not ask you to make it work. I asked you to play along. Playing along and making it convincing are two different things. He looked at her with something that was not quite amusement but was close to it. Your ex looked like he needed convincing. Elena opened her mouth. Closed it. He was not wrong, and that irritated her more than anything else about the evening. Because David had needed convincing. The arrogance in his face when he walked toward her had been absolute, the kind of confidence that only collapses when it meets something genuinely unexpected. And this man, whoever he was, had been exactly that. Unexpected. Who are you? She asked. He picked up his glass from the railing. He did not answer her question. Instead he said, Get home safely tonight. And don't mention my name to anyone. He walked back inside without looking at her again. Elena stood there, wind moving across the terrace, holding more questions than she had arrived with. Below her, the city continued doing what it always did, spreading itself out in light and noise and indifference, completely unmoved by the fact that her entire evening had just reorganized itself around a stranger who kissed her once and then left. She found out his name 2 hours later. She was home, sitting on the edge of her bed still in the navy dress, shoes off but everything else still in place, because sitting down fully felt like accepting that the night was over and she was not ready for that. Her phone lit up with a message from a number she did not recognize. No introduction. Just a link to a news article from 3 years ago. The headline featured a photo of the man from the party, younger but unmistakable, walking out of a courthouse surrounded by lawyers and silence. His face was turned slightly from the camera, but it was him. Kong Jae-won. 34. Businessman. That was what the article called him. But the article also mentioned things that businessmen usually do not have attached to their names. Connections. To a criminal network operating across 4 cities. A federal investigation that had been quietly dropped after 3 key witnesses changed their statements within the same week. Associates in Seoul and Los Angeles and New York. Money that moved through structures too clean to touch. Elena set her phone face down on the mattress. She had grabbed the hand of that man. She had kissed that man. In front of 100 people. On a rooftop. And now, somewhere in this city, every single one of those people had seen it happen, and some of them knew exactly what it meant. She did not sleep that night. But wait, here is where it gets complicated. David called the next morning. Then again in the afternoon. Then twice that evening. Elena did not pick up any of them. She had spent 12 years learning the shape of David's voice in different moods, happy, annoyed, distracted, apologetic, and the version leaving those voicemails did not sound like the arrogant man from the rooftop. It sounded nervous. It sounded like a man who had realized that the story he had been writing for himself had taken a turn he had not planned for. When he finally texted at 9 that evening, the message was short. We need to talk. Not about us. About who you were with last night. Elena, please. This is serious. She stared at that message for a long time. She thought about what it meant that David was not asking about the relationship. He was not trying to explain Amanda. He was not doing any of the things a man does when he gets caught. He was scared about the man she had been standing next to. She put her phone in her desk drawer and went to make coffee. The next morning, a woman Elena had never met was sitting in the lobby of her office building when she arrived for work. Young. Sharp-looking, with the specific kind of sharpness that comes from training rather than mood. She stood the moment she saw Elena come through the revolving door and introduced herself as Ji-yeon in a tone that made it clear introductions were a formality, not a conversation starter. She worked for Kong. And she had a message. He would like to meet this evening. He says you will want to hear what he has to say. Tell him I am not interested. Ji-yeon nodded politely. He said you might say that. He also said to tell you that David Reeves has been employed by a rival organization for the past 14 months. And that organization has been watching you since last night. Elena's coffee went cold in her hand. The lobby moved around her, people coming in, the security desk buzzing, someone laughing near the elevators, and none of it registered. She thought about David's voicemails. The nervous voice. The message that said this is serious. A man who had just been caught cheating should have been focused on damage control, on saving a relationship, on coming up with a story. Instead he was calling to warn her about someone else. She thought about what that meant. What time? She asked. The restaurant was in a part of the city that felt different at night, quieter, more deliberate, the kind of place where conversations happened that never appeared in any record. No social media check-ins. No loyal reviewers on food apps. Just a room where the tables were far enough apart that nobody heard anyone else, staffed by people who had clearly been employed for their ability to forget things promptly. Kong was already seated when she arrived. No bodyguards visible. No dramatics. Just a man at a corner table with 2 glasses of water and the same composed expression she was beginning to recognize as his baseline state. Not boredom exactly, not calculation exactly, but something in between that was entirely his own. He let her sit. He let her settle. He did not try to speak before she was ready, which she noticed, and then was annoyed at herself for noticing. Then he explained everything without softening any of it. David had been feeding information to a group called Shinryu for over a year. Shinryu was not the kind of organization that made headlines. It operated across the American and Korean networks quietly, running money through legitimate businesses and leveraging information through people who looked exactly like what they appeared to be on the surface. Employees, consultants, a boyfriend at a rooftop party. Kong had been building a case against them for months. He had not known about David specifically until 3 weeks before the party, when David's name surfaced in a document his team intercepted during a separate operation. So you already knew who David was? Elena said. Before the party. I knew what he was. I did not know he was connected to you. And now? Now Shinryu believes you are important to me. They watched what happened on that rooftop. They are not naive, they know that kind of display means something. They have resources and they will use you to get to me if they believe you matter to me. Elena kept her voice level. So I am in danger because of a lie I told at a party. You are in danger because of who David works for and what they saw last night. The lie only changed the timeline. You were already adjacent to something dangerous. Now you are visible inside it. He slid a single folded paper across the table. She opened it. The language was simple and precise, the kind of simple that had lawyers behind every sentence. They would appear together publicly for as long as the investigation required. He would provide her with discreet personal security. She would not discuss anything she saw, heard, or was told during this period. How long? She asked. 4 to 6 weeks. Possibly less if the final stage moves faster than projected. And after? After, you go back to your life and none of this follows you. She looked at him for a moment. The restaurant was quiet around them. Someone somewhere in the kitchen dropped something metallic and the sound traveled briefly and then stopped. She folded the paper back along its crease and pushed it toward him. No. She left. She walked out of the restaurant with her bag over her shoulder and her chin level, and she took the longer route home because she needed air and movement and the physical fact of her own feet making decisions. She was 3 blocks from her apartment when she noticed the car. Dark. Parked facing the wrong direction on a one-way street. Engine running at idle. When she turned the corner, it moved. Not fast. Not obviously. Just slowly enough to stay behind her. She crossed to the other side. It adjusted. She stopped to check her phone. It stopped too, sitting under a broken streetlight, patient in a way that made her skin tighten. She got inside her building, took the stairs rather than the elevator, locked her apartment door and then stood with her back against it in the dark, breathing. She checked every window in the apartment. She checked them twice. At 11:14 that night, she heard the sound of her kitchen window latch clicking. She called Kang's number before she had finished deciding to. "I will sign the paper," she said when he picked up. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Pause. "Then, I will have someone outside your door within 10 minutes. "I know. Elena." "What?" "You made the right decision." She hung up and sat down on the kitchen floor and waited for the knock. "If you are still with me, and I know you are, do me a quick favor and smash that like button right now. It costs you nothing and it means everything to this channel. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from tonight." Now back to Elena because things are about to escalate in ways she never saw coming. The first public appearance was at a business dinner in Midtown 3 days later. Kang's driver arrived for her at 7. She wore black, a structured blazer and wide-leg trousers, heels she could actually move in. She had spent 20 minutes deciding and then 10 minutes being annoyed at herself for spending 20 minutes deciding. At the table, Kang sat beside her with the kind of ease that came from never being the most nervous person in any room. He was different in public than she had expected. Not colder. Not more performative. Just more contained, the way a river looks calmer from the bank than it actually is underneath. He introduced her to the 2 men across from them without explaining who she was to him. He did not need to. People had already heard the story from the rooftop. The 2 men watched her with careful, measuring eyes, and she looked back at them steadily and did not apologize for it. She had expected him to be cold with her privately and performative publicly. He was neither. Between courses he asked her about her work. She was a senior buyer for a mid-size luxury goods importer that sourced from suppliers in Europe and East Asia, and when she answered he actually listened. He asked follow-up questions. Specific ones, the kind you only ask if you were genuinely paying attention to the answer before. When one of the men at the table made a comment about Elena's industry that edged toward condescension, Kang turned to him and said one quiet sentence. The thread ended completely. The man found somewhere else to direct his attention. In the car afterward she said, "You did not have to do that." "Do what?" "Correct him. He was being disrespectful. To me specifically or in general?" A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be interesting. "Does it matter?" She turned to look at him but his face was already back to its usual composition, giving nothing away. The city moved past the windows. She looked back out at it and thought about that pause. The appearances continued over the following 2 weeks. A gallery opening in Chelsea where a photographer got a shot of them near the entrance that circulated in one of those social-adjacent gossip aggregators within 48 hours. A late lunch in Koreatown that felt almost normal until David texted her that evening. The message said, "You have no idea who you are playing with." She screenshot it and forwarded it to Ji-Yun without writing back. Amanda was operating on a different frequency entirely. She had apparently decided that the best response to being seen at the party was to reframe the whole narrative before anyone else could. Posts began appearing across her platforms that did not name Elena directly but were shaped precisely enough that every single person who knew them would understand exactly who they were about. Phrases like "loyalty goes both ways," and "some people confuse borrowed attention for earned status." Elena read 2 of them on a Wednesday morning and then blocked every account Amanda managed, and then blocked the accounts she probably used to browse other people's pages, and then put her phone down and made tea and decided that Amanda could have that whole corner of the internet. What she could not block was the feeling of being watched. Not by Kang's people. That presence had a different texture, a kind of structured quiet that operated like a perimeter. Professional. Consistent. It felt like a wall, and walls are not threatening, they are just there. This other thing was different. This felt like something that moved when she moved. That paused when she paused. that was patient in a way that had purpose behind it. She mentioned it to Kong one evening after they left a private event at a hotel in Midtown. "How long has it felt that way?" he asked. His voice was casual, but his attention was not. 4 days. Maybe 5. I thought I was imagining it on the first day. By the third day I stopped thinking that. He said nothing. He did not dismiss it or tell her she was being careful. He simply absorbed the information in that way he had, the way she was starting to recognize, taking a thing in and putting it somewhere internal without letting it show on his face. But the next morning Ji-Yun called and told her to take a different route to work. Here is where it gets crazy. Elena had been deliberate about what she shared around Kong. She had not talked about her childhood in any detail, had not mentioned where she went to university or the fact that she had spent a semester abroad in Paris that she still thought about sometimes, had not brought up the apartment in Chicago she had almost signed a lease on 3 years ago before a job offer in New York pulled her back at the last minute. She had kept it professional. Useful facts only. She assumed he knew her in the way you know someone you have been briefed on, surface level, broad strokes. Then one evening they were walking back from a dinner through a neighborhood she had not been to in years. She had suggested it because she knew a shortcut and she was in heels and tired. They passed a small Korean restaurant on a side street that had new signage now, different name, different decor through the window, and she felt that specific low-grade sadness of a familiar thing being gone. "You used to eat there," Kong said. "Thursday nights, usually. Before it changed ownership." She stopped walking. The street was quiet around them. A cab passed. Someone 3 floors up was playing music low enough that only the bass carried. "How do you know that?" she asked. He realized what he had said approximately 1 second after she did. She watched something shift in his expression. Not guilt exactly, not panic, but the specific adjustment of a man who has let something out that he had intended to keep in. "I have been watching David's movements for months. You were part of that picture." "Part of that picture," she repeated. "That is a careful way to say you were surveilling me." "I was surveilling his network." "You were in his network." "I was his girlfriend." "There is a significant difference." He turned to face her fully then. In the low light of the side street, his face was harder to read than usual, the shadows evening out the details she had started to know. "I know where you went to school. I know about the job offer you turned down in Chicago. I know that your mother lives in Atlanta and that you call her every Sunday evening, usually between 7 and 8, and that those calls run long when something is bothering you and short when you think she will worry." He paused. "I also know that you are the only person in David's entire network who had no idea what he actually was. Which is the only reason I did not approach you directly before the party." She stood very still. "You let me," she said. Her voice was quiet, precise. "You knew all of that and you let me stay in that relationship and you watched and you said nothing." It was a poor choice of words. No, it was an honest one. "Which means everything else you have said to me about why we are doing this needs to be reconsidered." She walked again. He walked beside her without trying to justify or explain further, and she was grateful for that because she needed the silence to think. Around her the city ran its usual noise, a truck somewhere, a group of people outside a bar, a woman on her phone walking in the same direction and peeling off at the corner. Normal things. Ordinary city night. She was walking through it next to a man who had a 2-year-old file on her life and had kissed her at a party like it was the first time he had ever thought of doing it. She did not bring it up again that night. Not on the walk back to where his car was waiting, and not in the car itself where they sat in that now familiar silence that had developed its own texture over 3 weeks. No longer the silence of 2 strangers performing familiarity, but something with more weight to it, something that required actual presence to maintain. She was no longer simply a woman who had grabbed the wrong man's hand at a rooftop party. She was something he had been waiting to happen. And that changed everything. She did not bring it up again that night. That felt honest. And honesty, she was finding, was the only currency that held its value in this particular situation. What she had decided was that she was going to keep paying attention. To everything. To the way he answered certain questions and deflected others. To the specific things he chose to tell her versus the things that emerged sideways by accident or not at all. She was going to treat the next 2 weeks like the investigation she apparently already was, whether she had agreed to it or not. And she was going to do it without letting him know that she was. By week 3, the investigation was tightening in ways that Kong described to her in the evenings, between events, in that quiet window of time she had started to look forward to in a way she had decided not to examine too closely. Shinryu's financial channels were resolving. His team had traced 2 of them back through structures that looked clean at the surface. A consulting firm in Jersey City, a small real estate holding company with offices in Koreatown, but underneath followed patterns that only became readable when you had enough data points and enough patience. The final connection, the one that would expose the leadership and make the case unchallengeable, was 3 steps away. Maybe 2 weeks. She had started to understand what was at stake. Not in an abstract way, but in the way you understand things when someone trusts you with the details, the specific names of the accounts, the specific cities, the specific shape of what Shinryu was actually doing to the people it used and discarded when they had given everything useful they had. She started to understand why Kong had spent months on this, why it mattered to him beyond strategy. She had not asked him about that directly, but she had thought about asking. Then on a Tuesday morning, Ji-eun did not show up for their usual check-in call. Elena waited 15 minutes. Called twice. Texted once. Nothing. Ji-eun had never missed a check-in in 3 weeks. Not once. Not even when Elena told her she didn't need one. At 9:15, Elena's phone rang from a number she did not recognize. She answered it because something in her chest had already decided what the call was. The voice on the other end was smooth. Measured. English spoken with a precision that told her it was not the speaker's first language but had been worked at until it was nearly indistinguishable. Nearly, except for the specific formality of it, the slight overcorrectness that comes from learning a language entirely rather than absorbing it. We have been watching you with great interest, Miss Elena. We thought it was time we spoke directly. Where is Ji-eun? She is comfortable. Whether she stays that way is a question with a straightforward answer. We would like you to come and speak with us this afternoon. Alone. Without informing Kong. He gave her an address near the port. He told her 2 o'clock. He told her to come exactly as she was, no changes to her routine, nothing that would signal anything to anyone watching. She hung up and called Kong. His voice was controlled the way it always was, but she had spent enough time with him now to hear the thing that lived underneath the control, a specific compression like a sound being turned down rather than stopped. Do not go, he said. They have Ji-eun. I know. We know. We have a location on her and we are already moving teams. They will see your teams. They told me to come alone for a reason. They are watching for movement. Elena. I can get there in 30 minutes. I can walk in looking like a woman following instructions, which is exactly what I will be doing. I can buy you 20 minutes inside that building before they realize anything is different. 20 minutes is enough. A silence that had a lot inside it. This is not what we agreed to, he said. None of this has been what either of us agreed to. But Ji-eun is in there and she is in there because she works for you and they chose her because of me. So I am going. Tell me where to position myself when I get inside. She heard him exhale slowly. Then, east wall. Near the loading access. If anything changes before we breach, you go to the floor and you stay there. You do not try to help. Understood. If anything changes inside, anything, you call me immediately. Do not wait to assess it. Already planned on it. Before we get to the final scene, I need you to do something. If you have been watching this far and your hands are sweating even a little bit, comment below right now with the word Kong. Just that one word. I want to see how many of you are still in this with me. Subscribe if you have not already and let's get to the ending. She arrived at the warehouse at 2 o'clock exactly. There were 4 of them inside, positioned in a way that told her they had done this before. 2 near the entrance, 1 by the far exit, and the man who had called her standing near the center of the space next to a folding table, dressed like someone who had stopped performing professionalism and was simply operating. Ji-eun was seated in a chair in the middle of the room, wrists zip-tied, unhurt but carrying a specific kind of stillness that Elena recognized as someone who was furious and waiting. The man's name was Cho. She did not know this yet. She would learn it later from the paperwork, from the brief summary Ji-eun gave her in the car afterward, from the articles that appeared 2 days after this afternoon in very particular corners of the financial press. Cho had built Shinryu over 15 years from something small and local into a machine that touched 4 countries and moved things, money, information, leverage, through the spaces between legitimate structures. David had been one of dozens of people who worked adjacent to it without fully understanding what it was. Cho had a talent for finding people who needed something and giving it to them in exchange for access. You are calmer than I expected, Cho said. He studied her with the particular attention of someone who evaluates assets. I have been having a complicated few weeks, Elena said. Calm is relative. He almost smiled. It did not improve his face. Kong chooses carefully. I will give him that. I am not a choice he made. No. He tilted his head slightly. What would you call it? She looked at him steadily. She needed time. She could feel the building around her differently now. The air pressure near the east wall had changed slightly, a barely there displacement that meant people were outside it. Kang's people. Getting into position. She needed to keep Cho talking. I would call it a mistake he is going to regret, she said. Choosing someone who thinks for herself. Cho studied her for a moment. Then he began telling her what he wanted. For her to contact Kong, to arrange a meeting, to bring him somewhere exposed. The standard leverage operation. He explained it with the calm of someone who had run this particular play before and found it reliable. Elena listened. She nodded in the right places. She kept her breathing even. Across the room, Ji-Yun's eyes found hers. Just briefly. Elena glanced toward the east wall once and then back. Ji-Yun's posture shifted slightly, a micro-adjustment, a gathering of readiness. Elena waited until Cho turned slightly to gesture to one of his men. She knocked the metal tray off the table beside her with one sweep of her arm. The sound cracked through the warehouse like something splitting. Ji-Yun was out of the chair before the echo finished. The zip ties were already cut. She had done it herself, Elena realized at some point before Elena arrived, using something small and sharp that no one had found. She had been waiting for noise, for cover, for a signal that someone else was in the room who could create it. The east door came open 2 seconds later. What followed was not like anything Elena had seen on a screen. It was louder and faster and involved more moving pieces, and she did not watch most of it because she was focused entirely on getting herself and Ji-Yun to the far wall and staying low and staying out of the way of people who knew what they were doing. When it was over, Cho was restrained near the loading dock. His people were secured. The warehouse was full of Kang's team moving through it with the specific efficiency of people finishing a task they had been preparing for weeks. And then she saw David. He was near the back of the warehouse, being walked out by 2 of Kang's men, and he looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically, he was the same height, the same face, but something in him had collapsed. When he saw Elena, he stopped walking. The 2 men with him paused. His face did something she had never seen it do in 12 years. It broke open. Elena, they told me it was just information they said nobody would get. Don't, she said. Just that word. Quietly. Without heat. He stopped talking. She turned away and did not look back. They were in the car afterward, just the 2 of them, the partition between them and the driver giving them the particular privacy of being alone inside a moving vehicle in a city that did not know what had just happened. Ji-Yun had been taken to get checked over by someone medical and discreet. The rest of it was being handled by people whose specific skill was making things orderly and quiet. Elena was looking out the window. She was not shaking, but she was aware of her own heartbeat in the way you become aware of it when your body has been through something and is slowly revising its threat assessment downward. The city outside was exactly as it always was. Indifferent. Continuous. Full of people going home from ordinary days. Kong was looking straight ahead. You should not have gone in there, he said. I know. Ji-Yun would have been fine. She had already freed her hands. You could not have known that from outside. Pause. No. I couldn't. The acknowledgement was quiet and exact. She noticed it. Another mile passed without either of them speaking. The car moved through intersections, through the middle part of the city where the buildings got shorter and the streets got wider and you could see more sky. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Yes. She turned toward him. She had been deciding how to ask this for 3 weeks, whether to ask it at all, whether the answer would change anything, whether she was asking because she needed to know or because she needed him to have to say it out loud. That night at the party. When you kissed me. She kept her voice level and direct. Was it just to make the lie convincing? He was quiet. The car ran through a tunnel and the light changed and came back and he was still looking straight ahead. She waited. She had promised herself she would wait and not fill the silence, and she kept that promise. Then he said quietly. No. She waited. I had wanted to do it from the moment you grabbed my hand, he said. I did not expect you. I had been at that party for a specific purpose. A contact who never showed, someone I had been waiting 3 weeks to make direct contact with. I was standing there running out of reasons to stay. And then you reached out and took my hand like it was the simplest thing in the world. Like I was just a person standing next to you. He stopped. Started again. Nobody does that. Not to me. Not anymore. People know who I am and they position themselves accordingly. You just grabbed my hand. The city outside kept moving. What did you think? She asked. He looked at her fully then. She had seen his face in many states over the past weeks. Composed, watchful, briefly amused, once genuinely concerned in a way he tried to cover before she could name it. But this was different. This was the face without the management. I thought that whatever was about to happen next, I did not want to walk away from it. Elena held that for a long moment. She thought about the warehouse. She thought about Cho's careful voice and Ji-Yun's prepared hands. She thought about the folder on her life that was apparently 2 years old. She thought about Thursday nights at a restaurant that didn't exist anymore. This started as a lie, she said. Most real things start as something else. That is either very wise or very convenient. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile but the shape of one, the closest she had seen from him in 30 days. Probably both. She looked back out the window. The investigation was finished. The agreement was fulfilled. There was technically no reason for any of this to continue. No reason for the appearances or the evenings or the conversations or the specific attention he paid when she spoke about things that had nothing to do with Shinryu or David or any of it. The arrangement was over. And yet neither of them said so. Kong, she said. Yes. When this is officially closed, when your people file whatever they file and the case is done, what happens to us? He did not answer immediately. The car kept moving. Outside, the city was doing what it always does, enormous and unhurried and full of lives that had nothing to do with either of them. He had not answered when the car stopped in front of her building. He had not answered when the driver came around and opened the door. He had not answered when she got out and he walked her to the door and stood in the space between leaving and staying. She looked at him. He looked at her. I don't know, he said. But I know I am not done. She looked at him for one more second. The streetlight above them made everything look exactly as serious as it was. She thought about 12 years with David, 12 years of a relationship she had trusted completely, which turned out to be built on something hollow. She thought about 30 days with this man, which had started as theater and became something else entirely, something she still did not have a clean word for. She thought about the fact that both of those things could be true at the same time. Good night, Kong, she said. She went inside, took the stairs, unlocked her door, put her keys in the bowl by the entrance where she always put them, sat on the couch without turning a light on. The apartment was quiet the way apartments are quiet after a long day, not empty but resting. She sat in it for a while and did not reach for her phone and did not turn on anything and just let the evening sit with her. 3 days later, Elena got a call. Not from Kong. Not from Ji-yun. Not from anyone in that world. From a number registered in Seoul. The woman on the other end spoke quietly, in English so precise it had the texture of something rehearsed over many years. Miss Elena. My name is not important right now. What is important is that you understand something about Kong Jae-won that he has not told you. Who are you? Elena said. Someone who has known him for a long time. Long enough to understand what he does when he wants something. Long enough to know that when Kong Jae-won decides someone matters to him, he does not wait for it to happen. He arranges it. Elena's hand tightened around her phone. She walked to the window of her apartment and looked at the street below. Ordinary afternoon traffic, ordinary light. What are you telling me? The woman said, the night of the party. He was not there by accident. He knew you would be there. He had known for 2 days that David was planning to end things with you publicly that night. Shinryu had sanctioned it as a way to move you out of David's orbit cleanly. Kong knew. And he chose to be standing exactly where you could reach him. The room went very still. He staged it, Elena said. The words felt strange in her mouth. Flat. Not quite real yet. He was present. Where you could find him. That is not the same as forcing anything. But it is not the accident he let you believe it was. Why are you telling me this? A pause that lasted long enough to feel considered. Because you deserve to make an informed decision. And because the file on you, the one he mentioned to you last week, does not go back a few months. It goes back 2 years. He has known who you are, Elena, since before you knew his name existed. And I think you should ask yourself why. The call disconnected. Elena stood at the window for a long time after that. The street below was exactly as it had been. The same traffic, the same afternoon light, the same ordinary Tuesday. Nothing had moved. She picked up her phone. She looked at Kang's name in her contacts. She thought about the party. The way he had been standing still. The way he had looked at her not with surprise but with patience. The way he had kissed her like a man choosing his moment. Not surprised. Just waiting. She put the phone down on the table. She sat there in the quiet, with all of it laid out in front of her, and she asked herself the question she had not yet let herself ask. If he had arranged it, if he had been there on purpose, if the file was 2 years old, if none of the beginning was as accidental as it felt, did that change what came after? Did it change the 20 minutes inside the warehouse? Did it change the car ride? Did it change what he had said when she finally asked him directly? No. She thought that. Just that word. First. And then the second thought arrived right behind it, quieter, more complicated, the kind of thought that changes the shape of a question entirely. The kind of thought that does not announce itself but simply appears, fully formed, like it had been waiting in the room with her the whole time. She sat with both thoughts. The first one that said no. The second one that said but it should. She let them exist side by side without trying to resolve them, because she had learned over the past month that some things do not resolve quickly and forcing them only breaks something. Outside her window, the city was doing what it always did. But it should. And that is where we are leaving it tonight. Because the real story, the one that matters, the one that does not have a clean answer, is not about Shinryu or David or a rooftop full of witnesses. It is about a woman sitting alone in her apartment with a phone in her hand, deciding whether the truth about the beginning changes the truth about everything that followed. And it is about a man somewhere in this city who arranged a meeting he never expected to become what it became, and who is now waiting to find out whether she will call him or not. Do you want part 2? Because I have it ready. Every confrontation. Every answer. The conversation that happens when Elena walks back into that room knowing what she knows now. What Kong says when she looks at him and asks him directly. And what she finds out about the woman on the phone that makes the whole thing more complicated than either of them thought. Comment part 2 below right now if you want it. And if you are not subscribed to Stories from Seoul yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from tonight. We read every single one. Share this story with someone who loves a good twist. We will see you in the next one.